The baby OS cries echoed through the dark alley like a siren ripping into the night, and the little girl's trembling hands tried to tilt the cracked plastic bottle toward the infant's lips. But the bottle was empty, and she shook it desperately as if a miracle would refill it, and when nothing came out, she pressed the baby to her chest, whispering broken words, begging him not to cry as tears streaked down her own dirty cheeks. The sight was haunting and raw. From the mouth of the alley, a man in a tailored suit froze mid-step, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the mud. He had come here by accident, lost on his late walk back from a meeting where he had just signed a deal worth millions. Yet the sound that had pulled him in had nothing to do with money. It was pure human desperation. His eyes adjusted to the dim streetlight flickering above, and he saw her, a child no older than 9, clutching a baby, no more than a few months old, her face pale with hunger, her arms shaking so hard the baby nearly slipped. He stepped closer, cautiously, his breath caught in his throat as he realized the baby's lips were turning faintly blue. The girl looked up at him, startled, her wide eyes filled with fear and defiance. She pulled the baby tighter to her chest as if expecting him to take the child away from her. She whispered a hoarse plea. "Don't take him, he is mine. I promised Mama I would take care of him." The words stabbed into him sharper than any insult he had ever heard in the boardroom. He raised his hands slowly, trying not to frighten her, but the girl shook her head again, rocking the baby, her tears dripping onto his tiny forehead. The baby's cries had weakened now, turning into soft gasps that chilled the man's heart. The millionaire who once thought money could fix everything suddenly felt helpless. The alley smelled of rot, the walls stained with graffiti. Yet in that moment, it was not the place that horrified him. It was the realization that 2 innocent lives were on the edge of collapse. He crouched down, bringing his eyes level with hers, his voice steady but soft. "If you don't let me help, your brother will not make it through the night." The girl's lips trembled, but she pressed the baby tighter against her chest. She was skin and bone herself, her cheeks hollow, her clothes torn and filthy still. She said fiercely, "I can do it. I promised him I would never let anyone hurt him." The man's chest tightened. He had fought ruthless rivals for billion-dollar contracts. He had crushed enemies with a single phone call. But here, kneeling before this little girl, he felt powerless. Her words carried something he had never felt from the men who bowed to him in boardrooms, loyalty born not of greed but of love. He extended his hand just slightly, not demanding, only offering. "I will not take him from you. I will only help you feed him." The girl's gaze flickered between his hand and the baby, her resolve cracking as the baby let out another pitiful cry, then went silent. Too silent. Her heart skipped in terror. She shook the baby gently, trying to stir him awake, but his eyes fluttered weakly. Panic exploded in her chest. She looked back at the man, his suit catching the pale streetlight, his expression tight with urgency. For the first time, she let someone else near her brother. She whispered so softly he almost missed it. "Please help him." The man reached for his phone, his mind racing with contacts, doctors, resources he could summon in seconds. Yet for some reason his hands shook as he dialed. He knew this was no ordinary encounter, and deep down he felt it. The moment he stepped into that alley, his life had changed forever. But as the call connected and his voice demanded an ambulance, another shadow stirred at the far end of the alley, a figure lurking silent, watching. The millionaire Cries' voice was sharp as he barked into the phone demanding an ambulance to the location. His words crisp with authority, yet his hands trembled with an unease he hadn't felt in years. The little girl clutched the baby tighter, rocking him gently as if her small arms alone could keep his fragile breath alive. Her eyes darted nervously toward the darker end of the alley, where the faint scrape of a boot against gravel made both of them freeze. The man turned his head slowly, his instincts prickling the way they used to during hostile negotiations, when one wrong word could cost him everything. But this wasn't a boardroom, this was something rawer, more dangerous. He saw a figure leaning against the wall. Tall shoulders hunched, the face obscured by shadow, a cigarette tip glowing briefly before being crushed underfoot. The little girl's whisper was barely audible, her voice cracked with fear. "Don't let him take us back." The words pierced the air, heavier than any scream the man felt. The ground shifted beneath him. Who was this child running from who could terrify her so much that even now, with her brother fading in her arms, she feared being dragged away. The stranger stepped forward slowly, his coat brushing the wet walls, his voice low and mocking. "Thought you could hide forever, huh?" The man got twisted. It wasn't he, just a random passerby. This was someone who knew them, someone who had been hunting them. The millionaire stood tall, his usual air of command returning. Though his heart thundered, he placed himself between the girl and the stranger, his tone cold. "Who are you and what business do you have with children in an alley?" The stranger's laugh was soft but chilling. He spat to the side, then sneered. "None of your concern, rich boy. This girl owes me and I've come to collect." The girl shook her head violently, her tears spilling down her face. "No, I don't owe you anything. You said you would help us after Mama died, but you only hurt us. You took everything, you monster." Her words cracked something open in the millionaire's chest, a story hidden in her trembling voice. Betrayal, exploitation, cruelty. This wasn't just poverty. This was survival against a predator. The stranger's eyes narrowed. He lunged forward, but the man's hand shot out. Stopping him like steel years of commanding power surged back into him. His voice thundered. "You take one more step and I'll regret it for the rest of your miserable life." The stranger hesitated. His sneer faltering, he had not expected resistance, especially not from someone dressed in wealth and authority. But before he could retort, the wail of sirens pierced the night, growing louder. With each second, the man felt a brief surge of relief. The ambulance was close, yet he knew the danger wasn't over. The stranger cursed under his breath, backing into the shadows, but his eyes glowed with threat. "This isn't over," he growled before disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind only the stench of smoke and menace. The girl sagged against the wall, her arms tightening around her brother's limp body. The millionaire knelt quickly, his hand steadying hers. The baby's breath was shallow but present, barely holding on. He looked into her desperate eyes and promised quietly, "No one will take you again. Not while I'm here." Moments later, flashing lights filled the alley. Paramedics rushed forward, prying the baby gently from the girl's arms. She resisted at first, panicked. But the man's calm hand on her shoulder anchored her, his voice steady. "Trust them, they will help him." She nodded, finally sobbing into his suit as the baby was placed on oxygen. As the stretcher was lifted, the millionaire turned back to the alley. His jaw clenched, that stranger's words echoing like poison. "This isn't over." And deep down he knew it was true. What had started tonight was only the beginning of something far darker, and he was already entangled in it. The ambulance tore away into the night sirens, wailing, the baby inside, fighting for each fragile breath. The little girl stood frozen, her eyes locked on the flashing red lights until they vanished around the corner. She swayed weak from hunger, her body trembling, but her grip on the millionaire's sleeve was strong, as if he was the last thing anchoring her to this world. He felt the pressure of her small hand, and for reasons he could not explain, he didn't pull away. His chauffeur arrived, breathless. Moments later, the car's polished surface glimmering under the flickering alley lamp. The driver's eyes widened at the sight of the ragged child clutching his employer, but the millionaire silenced any questions with a single glance. The girl's lips trembled. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "They'll come back for us, one about they." The man hesitated. He wanted to say no to calm her fears, but he could still see the stranger's burning eyes in the dark. He gave the only promise he could, "I won, to let them." He guided her to the car, opening the door himself, something he had never done for anyone in years. Her fragile frame slipped inside. She curled in the corner like a cornered animal, still clutching the torn blanket that had wrapped the baby. As the car rolled through the glowing city, the millionaire's mind spun with questions. Who was that man? Why would anyone hunt children with such venom? And why did it stir such fury inside him when he thought of it? He should have felt relief the ambulance had taken the baby, but instead he felt only rage and guilt that he had allowed fear to shake him in that alley. The girl broke the silence, her voice soft but piercing. "His name is Roy. He was Mama's boyfriend after Papa died. He promised to take care of us. He promised to bring food, but instead he used Mama's money, and when she got sick, he beat her until she couldn't move anymore, and then he said I belonged to him now." Her words hit like thunder inside the car. The millionaire clenched his fists so tight his knuckles whitened betrayal cruelty inflicted on a child the kind of evil money couldn't erase. She went on, her voice shaking but steady. I took my brother and ran that night Mama died. I promised her I'd keep him safe. Roy has been chasing us ever since because he said we are his property. Her eyes burned through him, the raw truth of her pain stripping away the distance wealth usually gave him. He felt something he had buried long ago, an anger not for profit or reputation, but for justice, for innocence crushed under greed and cruelty. He spoke with a steel edge. Then listen to me. No one owns you. No one owns your brother, not anymore. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Roy's words, this isn't over-echoed like a warning bells clanging in the back of his skull. He knew men like Roy, men who fed on weakness and fear. They didn't stop. They lingered like shadows waiting for the right moment to strike again. The car slowed as it reached the hospital. The millionaire stepped out first, scanning the area with sharp eyes before guiding the girl inside. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled the air. Monitors beeped in rhythm down the halls. When they reached the emergency unit, a nurse rushed toward them, speaking quickly. The baby is stable for now, but he is malnourished. He needs care and protection. The girl sagged in relief. Sobbing into her hands, the man's chest loosened slightly, but only for a moment, because he caught sight of a figure down the corridor. Someone watching from behind the glass doors, a face half hidden but familiar, the cigarette glow sparking once before vanishing. Roy was here already. The sterile light of the hospital corridor felt suddenly colder as the millionaire's eyes locked onto that faint glow of a cigarette beyond the glass. Roy was there lurking like a shadow, waiting for his moment. The man's chest tightened with fury, but he did not let the girl see his alarm instead. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder and leaned down, whispering, "Stay close to me. Do not speak to anyone unless I tell you." She nodded, trembling, her eyes wide and fearful, as if she too had sensed the predator near her brother's room. A nurse approached, saying softly, "The baby needs time, but with care he will survive." The girl sob of relief was cut short when the door to the ward creaked open too slowly. Deliberate, the sound of boots against tile carried down the hall. The millionaire turned, and there he was, Roy. His face finally clear under the harsh hospital lights. He was gaunt, but hard-edged, his eyes sharp with cruelty, his smirk dripping venom. Well, looks like you've made yourself a little hero." He drawled, his gaze flicking from the girl to the suited man and back again. She stiffened, clinging to the millionaire's sleeve, but Roy stepped closer, unbothered by the setting his voice low. "You can dress in your shiny suit, but you don't know what you be walked into. She is mine and the brat is mine too." The millionaire's jaw locked. A lifetime of commanding men who wanted to crush him in business had forged his voice into iron when he spoke. Every head in the corridor turned. "They are not yours. They are children, not property. You will leave now before you regret it." Roy sneered, not flinching. His hand slipped into his coat pocket, and for a terrifying moment the man thought he saw the shape of a blade. Or worse, the girl whimpered, pressing her face into his side. His instincts screamed danger. But before Roy could draw anything, 2 security guards appeared running toward them. Drawn by the raised voices, Roy stepped back, his smirk never faltering, but his eyes burned with promise. "This isn't over. You can hide behind guards and glass, but I will get what belongs to me." The guards closed in, but Roy lifted his hands mockingly as if to say he wasn't afraid. He backed away down the corridor, the cigarette flaring again before the smoke swallowed him whole. The air seemed to release only after he vanished. She searched his face, desperate for truth, desperate for someone to finally mean the words spoken to her. She whispered, "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." He paused, the answer heavy in his chest. "Because I once lost someone and no one helped me. I will not let that happen to you." The weight of his confession hung between them, raw and unpolished, but real. She clutched his hand with tiny fingers, clinging to the promise she wanted so badly to believe. Yet even as he swore to protect them, his mind raced. He knew Roy would not stop. He had seen men like him before. Predators who thrived in shadows. The only way to keep them safe was to confront the darkness head-on. Wealth gave him power. But for the first time, he wondered if power alone was enough. As he stood by the hospital window watching the city lights shimmer below, he saw his reflection in the glass, not just a billionaire anymore, but a man bound by a vow, and he knew the battle was only beginning. And in the far corner of the parking lot, a car engine rumbled quietly. Roy, sitting inside his face lit by the cigarette-'s glow waiting planning patient as a snake coiled before the strike. The hospital walls were quiet that night, but the millionaire could not rest. He stayed seated by the little girl's side, watching her drift into an uneasy sleep on the hard chair. Her brother's tiny chest rising weakly under the glow of monitors. His mind should have been on contracts and markets. But all he could think about was the shadow of Roy crouched outside, waiting. Every creak of the hallway made his pulse quicken. Every flicker of fluorescent light felt like a warning. And when the clock struck past midnight, the tension finally broke. The fire alarm shrieked without warning. Red lights flashing in staccato bursts. Nurses rushed shouting instructions. Patients being wheeled toward exits. The millionaire stood instantly, his hand gripping the girl's shoulder, but she was already awake, eyes wide with terror. She whispered, "He's here, I know it." Through the chaos, he saw it. Roy moving with purpose disguised among the panicked crowd, his coat pulled tight, his eyes scanning until they locked on the girl like a predator. Finding prey, he pushed through the throng, and the millionaire shoved the girl behind him, his body forming a wall. Roy's sneer cut through the noise. "I told you she is mine." The millionaire's voice thundered above the chaos. "You will not touch her again." The crowd swirled around them, nurses screaming, alarms blaring, but in that moment it felt like the world had shrunk to just the three of them. Roy lunged, his hand flashing with cold steel, the glint of a knife catching the emergency lights. The girl screamed, and the millionaire reacted faster than he thought possible, grabbing Roy's wrist, twisting with all the strength, fury, and desperation that had been building since that first moment in the alley. The knife clattered to the floor, but Roy fought back, snarling his fists, striking hard. The millionaire staggered but refused to fall. Years of polished deals and distant living had not prepared his body for this raw fight. Yet something deeper drove him, not pride, not money, but the promise he had made. He slammed Roy against the wall, the impact echoing above the alarm. Security burst through at last, but Roy shouted over the din, his eyes bloodshot, his spit flying. "You think you can keep them from me, rich man? I know things you done it. I know what that girl really is. She isn't a T who you think she is." The words froze, the millionaire mid-strike, his grip tightening on Roy's collar, confusion storming through him, but before he could demand more, guards ripped Roy away, dragging him struggling and spitting down the corridor, his laughter echoing even as cuffs clicked shut. It was not the laugh of defeat, but of a man who knew he still had a card to play. The girl clung to the millionaire, sobbing against his chest, his shirt damp with her tears. He stroked her tangled hair, whispering it's over. But in his heart the words rang hollow, because Roy's voice kept twisting inside his mind. "She isn't T who you think she is." The alarms finally stilled, the smoke cleared, and the hospital slowly returned to a strained calm, but nothing inside him was calm. He sat with the girl in the quiet room, the baby now sleeping lightly in the crib, her small hand never letting go of his sleeve, and in the silence he asked himself the question that would not leave. What had Roy meant? What truth about this child was still hidden? And as dawn broke, painting pale gold across the hospital windows, the millionaire realized he was standing at the edge of something far larger than a rescue. He was standing at the threshold of a secret that could either save them or destroy them all. The hospital was quiet in the pale morning light, the chaos of the night before reduced to whispers and the faint beeping of machines. The millionaire sat rigid in the chair beside the crib, his mind turning Roy's words over and over. "She isn't that who you think she is." The girl was curled on the couch asleep, her arm draped protectively toward her baby brother. Even in dreams she clung to him, her face streaked with dried tears. He had called in his own people overnight, investigators, men who owed him favors. They worked fast, and by sunrise, one of them entered the room quietly, handing him a thin folder. The millionaire hesitated before opening it, his chest heavy as if he already knew what he was about to see. Inside were records, faded documents, and a hospital file from years ago. The girl's birth certificate showed no father listed, her mother's medical notes scribbled with signs of abuse and despair. But what caught his eye was a report buried in the back. It revealed that the baby the girl clung to so fiercely was not her biological brother at all. He was her mother's child with Roy. The millionaire's breath caught the paper trembling in his hands. The girl had believed with all her heart she was protecting her little brother. But the truth was darker. Her mother had hidden the baby. As true father from her terrified Roy would claim him when she died in her innocence. The girl had carried the burden as her own, swearing to her mother. I's last wish in believing a lie to protect a child who wasn't even her blood. He looked at her sleeping form. Her hair tangled, her face sunken from hunger, yet her arms curled in fierce protection around the boy. None of it mattered. The truth of bloodlines did not change the truth of love. The girl stirred awake, her eyes heavy. She noticed the papers in his hand, and fear lit her face. "What is it?" she whispered. The millionaire swallowed hard, then spoke gently. "It doesn't matter what these say. What matters is what you've done. You have protected him with a courage no one else could. You are more his family than any man like Roy could ever be." Her eyes widened, her lip trembled, and for a moment she looked as though she would break apart, but instead she straightened her shoulders, clutching the baby closer, her voice quiet but firm. "He is mine. I don't care what they say, he is mine." The millionaire's throat tightened, admiration flooding him. He saw in her not just a frightened child, but a warrior forged by pain. He knelt beside her, taking her hand, and for the first time in years his words carried no calculation, no hidden motive, just truth. "Then he is yours, and as long as I breathe, no one will ever take him from you." At that moment, the door opened. A police officer stepped in, informing them Roy had been formally charged multiple counts of abuse and endangerment. His face when dragged to the station was one of rage, but his threats meant nothing. Now the law had finally caged him. Relief rippled through the room. The girl clutched the millionaire's hand, tighter, tears of release falling freely. She whispered, "Thank you," but he shook his head softly. "No thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like." He arranged for care doctors, nutrition, and protection, not out of duty, but out of something new blooming inside him, a sense that perhaps saving these children had saved a part of him too, the part he had buried beneath wealth and pride. As the sun broke fully over the city, spilling gold through the windows, he knew life would never return to what it was before. One night in a forgotten alley had rewritten everything he had ever believed about power and purpose. And as he walked out of the hospital with the girl at his side and the baby in her arms, he thought of the lesson etched forever in his soul. Sometimes family isn't it the one you are born into. Sometimes family is the one you choose to fight for, even when the world tells you to let go. The end.